Ask yourself a question. If a friend comes and talks to you and says, I am suffering from a mental ailment, what is your first reaction? Ask yourself a question. If you are a young working adult, can you go to your supervisor and say, I'm having a mental health issue? Ask yourself these questions, and inside those questions, you will get the answers as to why you are having this conversation. Let me give you some very basic facts. More than 70% of people suffering from mental ailments are not able to go for help. 70%. Around 10% or so of people in countries like ours actually reach help. Now understand the difference here. We talk about mental ailments being prevalent. In fact, just the other day, WHO has talked about how post-COVID or during COVID, there has been a significant rise in depression and anxiety. We know for a fact that depression is amongst the single largest illnesses in the world. We know for a fact that 10% of the global burden of health is on neuropsychiatry, substance use. These are facts. Yet people don't seek help. And that's a question for all of us. In fact, stigmatization, unfortunately, has been the norm. And that's why we change the narrative, where destigmatization needs to become our approach. That has to be the only way, especially for all you young people here. You need to shape conversations of mental health in years to come, that no person should feel hesitation in speaking about their experiences, their feelings, their thoughts. Don't allow yourself to believe that this is a problem in our country only. This is a worldwide issue. Stigma is a worldwide issue. And almost 60%, 2 in 3, have also talked about how it has impacted their work life because of the discrimination that happens. So ask yourself a question. Is equity, equality, dignity not right for all of us? We use the word mental illness. Why do we use the word illness? Because we realize it is not in our control. If it's not in our control, why blame? Why allow any form of stigma to creep in? But it has. And that's the reality. And that's why we need to have this conversation of ensuring that we move out of this stigma that surrounds mental health. In our day-to-day conversations, how many times we use slurs? Oh, you are a psycho. Oh, I am an OC. Oh, you are. We use these. What happens is there is somebody listening who may be struggling. And when you are having this conversation, this individual feels, I can't talk now to any one of these people. What will they think about me? Would they feel I am not competent? Do I lack ability? Is there something lacking in me? So let me not share my thoughts. Let me not open up. That's what happens. So peers who can be pillars and support systems actually end up feeding into that stigma by the nature of conversations. The third component comes from the family. How many times would you have heard, isn't it? If somebody is going through a low phase and you'll be told, get up in the morning, go take a walk, it will be fine. Oh, why don't you start doing things? You are being lazy, you are not doing it on your own. Oh, you are a weak person. Oh, you have something lacking in you. You are only not putting an effort. But if the same person was having, let's say, nausea, vomiting, headache, the same person would have been advised, let me take you to the physician, let us see what is happening, take rest for 2 days, I'll get you your meds and treatment. That is the difference. And then you move forward to workplaces. You have conversations where you'll talk about pre-employment checkups, you'll talk about annual checkups, physical health tests, but nobody talks about the mental health component. Workplace mental health outcomes is not even something that we talk about. And if you take a dipstick into young people, working adults, you'll realize that the last thing that will come to their mind is to share if they are struggling emotionally or through a mental ailment, because they would feel that if I do so, people will think I'm incompetent. It'll affect my appraisal, it'll affect my success. And it is these kind of things which prevent people from speaking. You also need to appreciate that in these times of social media, faulty information, incorrect information, misinformation also is a cause of causing stigma. Because if I don't know the real reason, and if I'm only fed on incorrect facts, I'll be more predisposed towards believing in them. Look at some of the common myths here. Mental illness is for lifetime. Not true. Most of them are treatable. Most people lead a normal life if they get treatment. Medications, if they are given, they are sedatives, they'll knock you out. Not true. In fact, only sedatives will give you some sedation which are used for a shorter duration. Most meds actually do not have sedation. If you are given a medication, you'll be given it for a lifetime. Absolutely untrue. You will be also told if you have a problem, it's because you can't deal with stress. Not true. In fact, it's a biochemical change happening in my body, not in my control. It is your weakness. No, it is not my weakness. If I can get diabetes, I can get thyroid, I can get typhoid, I can get depression as well. All of these myths continue to be around us. And that's what has caused stigma over the years. Millions of people have suffered only because they thought I would be laughed at, mocked at, criticized, rather than I'll be taken care of, I'll be helped out, and I'll come over this and be very clear in the longitudinal axis of life. If an illness happens, it's a cross section. If the right support in the right time, in the right manner is given during that phase, that individual will lead as fruitful, productive, positive life like anybody else. That's why equity, equality, impetus with dignity is what we need to focus upon. Understand stigma now. So all these vectors are happening. So what's happening is you start having stereotypical thoughts. You think only like this, like some of the myths I talked about. These thoughts lead to an attitudinal change in you, and you develop prejudice. And this prejudice then moves on towards discrimination. Now, when you face discrimination in behavior, in attitudes, in conversations, you see these stereotypical thoughts and prejudice. This component is social stigma. Now, if I was this individual, and if I am bombarded with social stigma all across my family, my friends, my school, college, my workplace, social media, so on and so forth, what that does is most people become vulnerable and they internalize the stigma. And that social stigma becomes self-stigma, where I only start believing in what people have been saying. And that takes me further back, many steps back, where I'll now be hesitant to seeking help. I'll be hesitant to opening up. I'll be hesitant to talk. And what will that mean? That will mean if I had a problem today, let's say I have started having depression. And rather than talking to a friend or a family member or colleague and going to the right source for help, I won't take it. What will be the result? I'll struggle at an emotional level, at a productive level, and I'll become more vulnerable. And my condition would only worsen because I have not got an intervention. And the cycle of stigma, whether it is social, self, would only prevent an intervention. And that intervention could have been life altering. Something we all need to understand. Every time any one of you express your prejudiced thoughts in any form of discrimination, you are hurting someone somewhere. Every time you post something, you pass a comment that feeds into the stigma, you are hurting someone somewhere. And in the reality of our life, where mental ailments are so prevalent that we are more likely to know an individual with a mental ailment sheerly because of the sheer prevalence, you are actually ending up hurting somebody your own. And that's something we need to understand. That it's time that we change the narrative. How do you change the narrative? Should be the next question. You can't change the narrative by a mere conversation. You change the narrative by continuous conversations, one after the other. How do you change the narrative? By accepting with introspection and honesty that we as a collective have failed our own when it comes to our understanding of mental ailment. How do you change the narrative? Not by telling somebody there, you change yourself. You change the narrative by you changing you. In mental health, and be very, very clear about it. In mental health, everyone is a stakeholder. You don't need to be an expert. You are a stakeholder because stigma has the social component. Social is all of us. All of us. Every comment, every post can make a difference. Every negative experience that somebody experiences because of your conversation results into stigma. Stigma has an impact on an individual that they struggle, suffer, don't seek help, and are not able to lead a productive, positive life. Stigma affects an individual's family, and stigma affects the society because a society that lacks equity, that lacks equality, that lacks dignity will never be able to grow because we'll keep leaving behind people only because our stereotypical views got the better of us. So what do we do? Each of us is a stakeholder. You may be a school student. Bring compassion when you see a junior, a colleague, a senior struggling. Say no to slurs of any kind. If you are a high school student, become a role model. Bring the concept of life skills, positivity, acceptance. If you're an educator, please have in your school a mental health curriculum. If you're a policy maker in education, mental health curriculums need to become an integral part of school education and college education. At a societal level, we need to start about psychological first aid, where compassion and understanding of mental ailments becomes a natural part of who we are. If you are a workplace organization, bring awareness, acceptance, access of mental health for your employees. Value mental health outcomes. Create a culture of openness. If you are an organization, think about what kind of funding support you can give to the cause of mental illnesses. If you are a media house, a media personality, understand that you have a huge role to play because you shape so many people's thoughts and views and opinions. So you need to ensure that you are an ambassador and advocate of mental health, and you do not allow stigma to be fed in. In fact, you change the narrative. If you are from the media entertainment industry, think before you show something. Creative liberty cannot be at the cost of human dignity. And you think about it. Comedy cannot be the reason to mock vulnerable people that can impair their functionality and that can prevent them from seeking help. Think about it. So if you want to change the narrative, raise your hand. Be counted. Each one of us has a role to play. Healthcare providers need to integrate mental health programs. Mental health awareness needs to become integral to our conversation. But the words we choose is a reflection of how we think. If you want to change the narrative, then you change the way you think. And that has to be the way forward. Mental health for all. So my parting message to you all, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Unmute every time you see faulty information, incorrect information. Spread awareness. Unmute yourself when you see a negative comment or slur. Spread positivity. Unmute your compassion when somebody is talking to you about their struggles. But if you are an individual who's going through any kind of mental health concerns, unmute yourself and talk to someone. Even though you may feel one person did not respond to you well or second person did not, with time you will see more and more people being open to it. The conversations need to begin, and they begin now, because now is the time to change the narrative. So our topic in years to come would no longer be stigmatization of mental health. It will be how we destigmatized mental health, change the narrative.